afternoon, everyone. The theme for this discussion is, India, India's rising influence in the global education ecosystem. I am accompanied by three very distinguished panelists, each of whom brings a very different, they have a very different, unique vantage point, and we're looking forward to their views on some of the topics that we're going to discuss today. Sahil, I'll start with you. Just to give an introduction, Sahil runs a platform, College Dunia. They are one of the largest matchmakers, I would call it, a platform that matches students and colleges both in India and overseas. Sahil, so one of the points that I wanted to speak to you or wanted to ask you is increasing the number of international students that are studying in India is a key focus for the government, even as per the national education policy. However, if you look at the data, that number of foreign students that are studying in India is sort of stagnating at around 50,000 students. What are your views there, and if you can share some context on that point?
So right now, the foreign so first give me context. So we are College Dunia. We are like the TripAdvisor for colleges. College Dunia has more than 10 lakh or 1 million reviews of Indian colleges and abroad colleges. So whenever students have to decide whether to study in India or abroad, which college, they come to our platform. We are one of the largest platforms for it. This is one of the biggest problems we've thought about. Why is it that foreign students are not increasing overall? So let's just look at the broad problem. The foreign students, about 70% of them who are anyways coming, are coming from Nepal, Bangladesh. A lot of them who are coming are subsidized by the Indian government. So India is not becoming a natural pull. Now let's look at a lot of the Africans and the affluent Africans who actually, excuse me, go abroad. They look at two or three things. One is the employability after education, the average salary after education. So I think from the government perspective, we really need to liberalize the visa rules, which a foreign national should have after completing his education. Then itself, the return on Indian education as compared to, so let's look at an average Nigerian student who has an option to go to UK, US, and India. So, and in the UK when he goes, maybe he spends probably double the amount of education for the same master's education, but his return on the education is maybe 1/5 of that. So we get lagged there. One of the factors is also that we are lagging a bit behind in the QS and other rankings. So we really need to climb that up. That in itself I'll come to later, which is something slightly hackable, but it comes a lot of money. And one of the things which we have to look at is maybe the Chinese example, in which, I'm sorry, when the Chinese economy grew to about 11,000 GDP per capita, it itself was creating great employment opportunities for students for the rest of the world who did their education in China but were employed with the Baidus of the world. Our average employment has to go up to that level where there is good return on that education. We are still that far. I think the moment our GDP per capita starts to cross $8,000 to $10,000, where an average Arabic person, a Lebanese person is getting a good return on his education, he's getting good employment opportunity, and he's respected by the employment system. Like a lot of the foreigners are not respected by the employment system in India because we anyways have a lot of students of our own to place. So there is, so I think that is what is lagging. So let's be honest, I think we really need to improve the average incomes. Then you might create the best of the colleges, doesn't matter. You need to create better employment generation. So let's be, college is a return on investment scheme. To put, that's what it is. For majority of this, we have to look at return. If it's not there, it's not there.
Thanks, Sahil. Sahil referenced China there for a minute. Just for context for everybody, China has about 500,000 students, international students studying in China, right? And India is like 1/10 of that. Shifting gears to international universities now trying to set up campuses in India, right? So with the new NEP policy that was launched in 2020, the doors for international universities or global universities to set up a campus in India were open. Pooja, Pooja is a founding team member at Emeritus. Emeritus works with some of the leading universities, in India and globally, and helping them digitize. Using your vantage point, how do you feel this liberalization of sorts to allow foreign universities in India? How does that change the landscape in the education landscape in the Indian context?
Thank you, Rishabh. So, first of all, it's nothing new. I think for time immemorial, partnerships, international partnerships between Indian institutes and global universities have existed. So to that extent, it's not new. However, the new policy certainly gives this entire internationalization of partnerships new wings. Now, how does that happen? You already have a Deakin here, you have a Wollongong here, Southampton has announced, there are more coming. But what's interesting is that this is going to actually positively impact the traditional landscape, because the opportunity to do research deeper on ground, the opportunity for faculty exchanges to happen, the opportunity for students, perhaps exchange to happen, semesters, all of that. I think all of that is going to get certainly impacted in a very positive way. The joke, however, is that it is easier for a foreign university to set up a campus here today than for an Indian university. As I think Sekhar was mentioning in another panel that I was listening to. And the way we think about it at Emeritus, so to us, the mission and the vision, which started 15 years ago, was to connect learners around the world with the best universities in order to provide access to high quality and affordable education. Now, we've been doing that for many years. And to us, this is just an icing on the cake, because what more could we ask for in India than to create an access for students in India to foreign universities and the top quality education. So I think from an Emeritus standpoint, we are super excited with this policy. And if you think about it, the policy, by the way, states that 10% of the education can be delivered online. So for all the partners, who we've been enabling for many years doing that online, I think that just only gets better and gets more forward with this new policy. So yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Just to follow up, not to put you in a spot there, but publicly, what's public knowledge is there are a few universities that have already announced, global universities, to set up campuses in India, right? Using your vantage point, I think you may have some more context there. How rapid do you think or when do you see, India looking at some of the best institutions, or how many institutions are actually looking to set up both in India in the next few years? Any context that you can share, if at all?
So I think, I think the government of India is rolling a red carpet and inviting foreign institutions to come and set up campus here. So I think the kind of support that the government is giving is absolutely incredible. They're actually allowing universities to come and set up campuses with full autonomy. So the kind of curriculum that you have, the kind of pricing that you want to charge, where do you want to be, what segment you want to do, what programs you want to do. I mean, think about it. It is just the most forward-looking liberal policy in that sense, right? So the government is really doling out a red carpet in that sense. Now, a few that you and I both know, I think are already out in the news, but I was just reading about Newcastle, just I think day before, and there's already talks going on that we actually read in the press article that got published by the PI. But my sense is, if you were to really push me on that number, I would think at least 8 to 10 should hopefully, and it's what you've seen right now is a couple of universities from Australia, you've seen one from UK, but I suspect many more from UK, from Canada, from New Zealand, from US, right? I mean, the door's really open in that sense, inviting across the globe. So there's no looking back, and there couldn't be a better time for India. And more power to the government to give it more wings.
Thank you. My next question is to Avni. Avni represents Shulini University. Shulini has carved a very, very unique niche for itself as a research-focused university in India, done very well. I think it's sort of punching above its weight, as some would say it. Shulini, one question that very specific to, and I think you would be best positioned to answer this, is relating to this theme of the Indian education ecosystem in the global context, right? some of the world's best companies recruit at the Indian IITs, right? They're world renowned. But whenever you look at this, the rankings, let's say the QS World rankings, none of the Indian IITs in the top, I think 2 of them in the top 150, none of them in the top 100, right? Now, the reason I say you will have a unique vantage point is Shulini is the highest private ranked, Indian private ranked university in the same QS World rankings. Can you share some context on, on this aspect of how, IITs are looking at these rankings and whether these rankings are, and how the rankings function and, what is how does Shulini view at this entire aspect of the QS World rankings, for instance, or any other ranking methodology?
Thank you for that question. So I heard Sahil, my fellow co-panelist, already use the word hackable, so we'll come back to that in a minute. But just to give a little context of Shulini, so we are 16 years old, very, very young in the context of the age of universities. And we believe that what we've done in 16 years at Shulini, making it India's #1 private university in QS World University rankings, I think we can replicate the same magic in less than 6 years now. And let me tell you why rankings are not hackable. Higher educational institutions are supposed to be doing 3 things. That's my view. They're supposed to be creating knowledge, new knowledge as we say. They're supposed to be disseminating knowledge, and mixing the both, they are supposed to be using this knowledge to impact society in a good way. Now, what Indian institutions have been great at doing for all these years is disseminating knowledge, right? I don't think so we have been at the cutting edge of creating new knowledge. And because we do not create a lot of new knowledge, we're not publishing the best research papers, we're not really filing patents, we're not ingrained, we're not really intertwined with the industry, or vice versa, the social impact of higher educational institutions is fairly limited. Now, what happened at Shulini, and I want to give this story to everybody. When we started our operation 16 years ago, our founder chancellor, who studied at the Oxford, when he came back to India, he said, how can a university not do research and call itself a great institution? And we did a very interesting analysis. So if you plot the perception of a university or the outcome of a university against the research that they do, there is a direct correlation. So universities like Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, I mean, they're not great. They haven't become great, just by some fluke. They have consistently focused on research. Many people at Shulini also sometimes they argue, you filed 1,500 patents, right? How many have you commercialized? And I often say that a lot of research that happens inside the lab of a university needs to then be picked up by the industry to make something more impactful and meaningful out of it. And I think that's where we lack as a nation. So to answer your question, that's what ranking is all about. And unfortunately for us, we publish very, very high quality research papers. In fact, internal benchmark at Shulini is that you cannot publish in a journal which has an impact factor of less than 2. Despite the UGC waiving off the guidelines for publishing research papers as part of the PhD, Shulini has taken a very strong stance that you have to publish high quality research papers if you really want to be called a PhD from Shulini. We run a very interesting program. It's called One Student, One Patent Policy. We've been doing it for the last 6 years, and some of the best patents that Shulini has filed today actually come from my undergraduate students. We also have a tiering in terms of the faculty that we have. So we have some faculty which is research faculty, some faculty which is teaching faculty, and then there is some which is a mix of 2. Now, this is probably the standard model in any great Western institution. And I think what we've been able to do is we've been able to bring a lot of those learnings, replicate it on the ground, and achieve what we have achieved in 16 years. So I don't think rankings are hackable. It's a lot of hard work. I also want to just add to something that Pooja said, and all of us should look at this, all eyes on India. To a lot of fellow colleagues who are here and people who are here from overseas, I think it's important for you to understand this context as to why we're really talking about Indian footprint on global education. Currently, we're about 45 million learners in higher ed. And we need to, for the gross enrollment ratio to go to 50%, we need to add another 30 to 35 million people in the higher ed space. Give and take, it's a 2 to 3 trillion worth of investment. Now, how I've calculated this, so you basically multiply 30 million seats by the amount it takes to create one college seat, roughly. So we're talking about give and take 2 to 3 million, 2 to 3 trillion dollars, right? There's no way we can do this. So we need all our foreign friends in the room. We want all of you to come here, set up great quality institutions. And that's the magic of India. And that's the reason we're having this debate today, that how India is going to really impact the global education landscape.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Amni. Sahil, I know you have some views on the QS rankings. Please. And all other rankings for that matter.
So basically, see, first is if you look at the sponsors here, it's Amazon, us. If you just take them, right? So I was not really looking at most of the Indian universities from that perspective, but if you just look at, so I know a lot of Irish and British universities which are ranked much higher than IITs, and I was just commenting on them. Ask any of the employers here, how many of you recruit from those Irish and British universities? You know what is the answer you'll get? Almost zero. And the quality of a British university, I'm not talking about the Oxfords of the world, out of question, okay? But I'd still prefer an Indian student IIT or even the 20th ranked engineering college from that rather than a 30th ranked college in the overall QS rankings, right? This is not me, ask the Amazons, the Googles of the world and look at their placement data. So I think so there are three factors. One is employability. So I think employability, QS does a very, very abysmal job of judging the employability. The second part is, if one of the things they judge on in the research papers, right? Now, research papers, if you look at the journals like Lancets of the world and a lot of the others, right? They're inherently, and it's not me, it's published. Like there is a clear bias towards, giving Westerners a chance to publish in them. So you might just create, and this is not me, this is documented, create the same quality of research paper and you might be at a disadvantage. But if you are as an Indian university just publishing like you guys, much more than the other university, you'll have an advantage of all the other Indian universities. That is true. The third is where we have a natural disadvantage is basically foreign students, right? If you look at ISB, I think it is good education, but because of our economic outlook, we are at 2,700 GDP per capita. Not a lot of foreign students want to come. So if by magic, government says all of the education is free to all the universities and we somehow take it to 20-30%, magically you will see all the university rankings go up by foreign students. Now, just adding foreign students should add to employability, I don't think so, but this is how the matrix are decided. And the fourth factor is basically, I think with Trump that will go away, which is like they have a 4% or 5% quota for DEI, diversity or something like that, right? So I don't think Indian universities are allowed to have LGBTQ recruitments officially, but if they had, you can go up in QS rankings. So best of luck. So these are the four factors in which I think they are somewhat hackable. I was not specifically mentioning the research thing. There are four different factors. And if you look at who have had, like the Chinese universities Peking has, right? What did they do? They simply opened up a lot of budgets, right? They hired a lot of Spanish professors who anyways were not very employable in Spain. They got them to, China, paid them a lot. And second thing which they did was they hired a lot of international students. So, students from Ukraine, Russia, which were, subsidize that. So subsidize these two things, take a bit of a care for DEI initiatives, and you're good to go in QS rankings. So very clear agenda, anybody of any university here, and with the support of Indian government, you have a good shot at it.
I think for what it's worth, the Indian government has now started to publish QS world rankings and the updates that various institutions have.
Yeah.
So what at least I foresee is,
I think they'll still be able to do the foreign, they can subsidize, but I think DEI, they lose 3-4%.
So I think the government, there's something called ease of doing business rankings, right? And the government said that we want to just get in the top echelons in that ranking, and they just did a lot of those initiatives. I think
by logic, reservations in India should qualify for DEI. Yeah. It does not. It's funny.
Super. So I just want to shift gears a bit. We're talking about international students coming to India. We spoke about international universities coming to India. Now we want to shift gears and talk about internet, like, arguably, according to me, the biggest influence that India has on in the global scheme of things is Indian students going overseas and making an impact in the world, right? 1.3 million students currently, Indian students studying outside of India, US, Canada, Australia, these are the top 3 countries. But in the last 2 years, we've seen tremendous immigration-related headwinds. We see that across the board, right-wing parties coming across, anti-immigration stance is getting stronger in almost every geography that we're looking at. Given your vantage point, interacting with students literally across the country, how do you see this trend of Indian students going overseas? Is that number going to increase, decrease? Given all the context around the geopolitical context, what are some views that you have there?
So there are 2 aspects of it. One is Indians emigrating for just studying abroad. That as a trend will really go up. So you'll find a lot of Indians going abroad, studying there and coming back. And we are very, very optimistic that the number, I think, was about 5 or 7, 8 lakhs of students Indians went abroad. We think the number will double in the next 5 or 6 years. As Indian GDP per capita doubles or triples, and in the next 15 years, that number will triple. So by all estimates, Indians will be the biggest spenders for overseas education abroad. Now let's understand why is that happening. It happened in China also. A lot of that happens for social status perspective. We've seen that there are a lot of tier B universities in the UK where Indians emigrate to, because I think studying in UK for some Indian parents matters a lot, which is that aspect. The other is it also adds to a lot of the economy of these industries, because if you look at, let's say, Britain, except for tourism and education, there's nothing in that economy. I mean, it's not nothing, like majority of that economy, and the
cricket
shopping. That's majority, right? So, it's the old, if you want to have the old school education and the brand of coming back. But on a positive side, which I think, and this happened in 1970s in Singapore, that Lee Kuan, the president, really encouraged people to go abroad, have a global perspective to come back. If you look at a lot of the startups which are made by people who were educated outside and came back to India, like your founders at Emeritus, right? We have great examples of a lot of D2C founders who studied in the UK, got a global perspective, who studied in US, got a global perspective. And Rishabh, I think you are also an example of that, right? Got a global perspective and starting out in India. So I think we have great case studies of you doing well. So I think the trend looks very positive.
So, Pooja, my next question is to you. I think Emeritus has a fantastic vantage point because you all work with the best institutions, the MITs, the Harvards of the world. You all work with, likewise, some of India's best institutions, the IITs, the ISBs. Similarly, you all are also servicing, students, the best students in India and also globally, right? How, according to you, and this is more generic, relating to this theme, what is your view on the rising influence or the Indian influence on global education, and what are some views that you have, given your vantage point as, with Emeritus, both with the institutions global, outside of India and in India, and interacting or, experiences with learners in India and outside of India?
So I think I'll go back to the theme, right? All eyes in India and all eyes on India. And I think that's what you're talking about. But let me just step back for a minute and just think about data. I think you mentioned it, Avni, that 45 million students in higher education. Not sure how many of us here know, but last year, 11 million students in India graduated out of high school. Now, that's a huge number. 11 million students graduated out of high school in India. Out of that 11 million, about 1.5 million were actually in the top 15 percentile, which means they were at 85% and above in the kind of marks that they received. Now, against that, only 200,000 seats exist in India for those students to get placed in colleges. So you're talking about at least 1.5 million students in India who did not get placed because there aren't seats in India, and this is the top academic quality that you can that you can think about. So that perhaps gives you a peek into the massive supply-demand gap, right? And to Avni's point, with the government saying that, look, we need to increase the gross enrollment ratio, double it up, et cetera, where is the supply going to come from? And I mean, Hindi ke bacche kahan padhenge? Right? I mean, it's great to say that we want to have this vision, but hey, where are the seats? Where are the colleges? So I think to that extent, perhaps, and you know, sometimes when foreign universities think about it, right, and because we, like you rightly said, are enabling partners in the online space, but obviously this is a dialogue currently going on everywhere in the world. So everyone's saying, are you sure there is capacity in India? And we're saying, dude, we have so much demand. We need more and more universities to come in. So yeah, from that standpoint, I think the supply-demand gap is massive. More the number of universities come in, more the collaborations here, more it is going to benefit the students in India, you know, who are going to get the benefit of this education. And apart from that, the online, by the way, not everybody can afford going abroad, much as you want to do that, my friend. For those who are going to be studying in India, and even if the foreign universities like Deakin is already offering their degree at half the price, that is still expensive, right? There is still an affordability gap, and you know, I'll quote the Emeritus founder here. He says that India is a land with oceans of poverty and islands of prosperity, and perhaps the only bridge that is going to take people from the oceans to the island is going to be education. So I think education has always been the means of liberation in India. Parents are constantly and always hungry and making sure that the children are getting educated and getting the highest benefit of that. And of course, I think online, blended, all of that is going to just explode even more. I mean, we are seeing nearly a 40% growth in our online business, and about 25% of that overall population is coming from India. So clearly, there is enough opportunity for students to go to class, to learn online, to do blended. And you know, there couldn't be a better time to do this. So India is absolutely poised. And I think somebody was quoting in the earlier panel, the country with perhaps the youngest demographic dividend, but also the largest talent pool. So there is going to be a lot of potential for those who are looking at India to leverage that.
Thanks, Pooja. You mentioned about online. One anecdote that, you know, at least I have is, we work with a lot of universities, both for their offline fee payments and their online fee payments, online students fee payments. Almost in all the universities that we're working with, within a span of 4 or 5 years, we're seeing the online headcount, the headcount of online students surpassing their offline university headcount, which in many cases have been established. Those universities have been established for decades, right? And within a span of 3, 4, 5 years, we're just seeing tremendous growth in the online university segment. So that's there. Avni, as with Shulini, you all have, you know, a lot of experience or a lot of context on foreign collaborations with global institutions, right? With the central theme of, you know, India's influence in the global education ecosystem in mind, any context that you'd like to share about your experience and what other Indian institutions can look to benefit by, you know, similar collaborations that similar to what maybe Shulini is already doing?
So I think I'm just going to touch upon a little context on partnerships. And I think historically, when India looked at Africa, or the US or the UK looked at India, I think we've always looked at T&E, right? Transnational education. So we just want to have lots of agents working around in a country like ours, and you just want to look at more and more students going out. So I think times are changing, and in the context of partnerships, while I'll come to one example, so there's this beautiful partnership that we have, Shulini University has with the University of Melbourne, and I'll come to that in a second. But what's essentially happening is, from T&E, I think we will now, all of you will see this gradual movement to a deeper partnership, which probably is what we call a 2+2 or a 1+1, which then moves to one step further, which is like a dual degree program, you know, where the foreign university and the Indian partner sort of literally come together and decide to have their name on the same piece of paper in terms of a dual degree. The next is, of course, what Emeritus is doing fantastically, which is bringing high quality foreign university education into India through completely online means. And I think the fourth is going to be, you know, when foreign universities actually set shop in India. So that's how I see the partnership space deepening over a period of time. And I think it's essential to see that when you have a demand-supply gap like you have in our country right now, there is probably no other way to go but to look at deeper partnerships. And amidst all of this, now you fit in industry. So not every partnership is going to be online, not every partnership is going to be a 2+2, not everybody will have the wherewithal to come and set up a campus in India. We will need industry for skilling, we will need online for working population. So I think that's really the landscape of partnerships, and that's how it's evolving. Now, specific examples from Shulini, one that I'm personally very, very proud of. We built this partnership with the University of Melbourne about 2 years ago. It's a top 13 university in QS. I mean, a lot of people argue that it's almost as good as the top 10, top 15 in the world today. And I think what's interesting is that probably 7, 8, 10 years ago, we would have gone to Melbourne and Melbourne would have said, okay, let's do a 2+2. Your students can study with you for 2 years, then you can send them over to us. We'll give them a degree. This is amazing. We have actually at Shulini co-created the content with University of Melbourne, which is contextualized to Indian students. We have co-branded all pieces of collateral. We have gone to the market together, so the go-to-market strategy is not just Shulini alone. And I think what gives me immense happiness is that we don't see ourselves as agents of a foreign university operating in India. So they seem to be as invested in the success of Indian students, some of whom may go abroad eventually as part of the dual degree program, as we feel invested in our own students' outcomes. And I think that's a shift. And a lot of universities in India, high-quality private universities in India, probably can look at some of these deeper partnerships. And I think that's what's going to change, change the destiny of a country like ours. Where do I pick this? So I think a lot of you might be aware of Maruti and Suzuki partnership, right? Now, when you are catering to the Indian masses, you create a certain kind of car, right, at a certain price point. The same car, the same manufacturer, when he's selling that vehicle in a Western market, the quality and the specs, everything is a little different. And I think that's the power of our country, because the number and the demand is so huge that if you put your thinking cap on and if you're a little ingenious and creative as to how you want to tap into this market, some amazing business models and partnership models can come in. So I think that's a takeaway of what we've done at Shulini with Melbourne.
Thanks a lot, Avni. I think we're almost done with time, so maybe I'll just quickly summarize the views shared by all the three panelists. I think India is just getting started. I think it's day zero as far as we speak of the Indian influence in the global education system. Sahil spoke of how the influx of foreign students coming to India is only going to move once India crosses a GDP inflection point of per capita inflection point, maybe $5,000-6,000 a year. That makes it attractive, and given India's fast economic growth rate, it doesn't seem very far away. Pooja spoke of how there are many global universities coming into India in the next few years. Tens, everyone from USA, New Zealand, few UK and Australian universities have already set up or already announced their plans. So that will certainly shake things up and bring a lot of global influence or global context into the Indian education ecosystem. And finally, Avni spoke of how Indian institutions, and really Shulini is one of the best case examples there, how Indian institutions are going out of their way to partner with global institutions and creating that cross-border learning gap, or trying to bridge that cross-border learning gap. So I think it's day zero as far as India's influence in the global education ecosystem goes, and things are only going to look upwards from here. Thank you.